In this tutorial, we'll work through baking out the simulated motion from the geometry nodes network into a more traditional animation rig. Geometry nodes networks output a single mesh object, but we want to be able to parent the vehicle and wheels to animated bones for export and general use. We'll also add a scene locator to the animated Jeep and the ground. So first, let's switch back to layout view. There we go. And we're going to enable the CJ6 and wheels collection. And as before, the collections instantiate at the scene origin. So if you want to see where they're actually showing up, we can look at the scene origin down here. Yeah, so it's just a Jeep in the middle of the scene origin. We'll do edit, preferences, add-ons, and we're going to install the car rig baker. In this case, I've already installed it. And then make sure it's enabled. Then we're going to hit N to open up the windows and click the car rig baker tab. We want to bake the geometry node data into the armature of the Jeep. Now, recall that the armature is part of the Jeep prop blend file. We brought it in with a file link command, and you can see that by the link outline on the collection and on the different objects. This means that they are brought in with a link, and so the original object is elsewhere. And in order to edit linked objects, we need to do a library override on them. So first of all, we're going to open up the Armature collection under the CJ6 collection, and we're going to right-click on the Jeep Armature, and we're going to pick Library Override, Make, and select it. So now we have a library override on that armature. Now, this will change the name of the armature and added a .001, as it's now creating a new override object in the scene, and it adds the .00 number to the original object name to avoid name conflicts. So that's important to remember later on. Now, under the rig object, we're going to click on this, and we're going to pick our geometry node rig object. Under the armature object, we're going to click our eyedropper, and we're going to pick our Jeep Armature 001 object that is in our linked Jeep. And we're going to click the body bone and pick the Jeep root, and we're going to match the wheel bones to their correct wheels. All right. And to watch the progress of the next step, we could open up our console window to see our progress. So now we're going to click Bake to Bones, and we can watch the progress in the console window of the bones, the frame numbers that it's baking through. Okay, so now when you scroll through the animation, you can see that the CJ6 collection that was at the origin is now exactly matched to our geometry node's mesh output. That's why you see the two meshes conflicting. We no longer need the rig info collection. We're going to disable that as we've successfully baked it. And we'll just work with the baked Jeep collection going forward. We're going to right click on scene collection. I'm going to make a new collection and going to rename that and call that scene locators. And we're going to shift right click on the ground, a spot near the Jeep, and shift A to add. We're going to add an empty, and we're going to rename that scene loc ground A. That gives us one vantage point to see the Jeep go by. And next we'll add a scene locator to the Jeep seats. So we're going to type Z and pick material preview. As we zoom in, we can see that the windshield and windows have a transparent glass material, but due to the way the ARKit works, the live action person won't be displayed correctly behind them. So we'll hide them in the viewport view. That means they won't be exported to USDZ when we have the default visible only checkbox selected in the USD exporter. So we're going to click on every window piece and press H to hide them. All right. And now we can put a scene locator on the Jeep seat. So we can scroll here, shift right click, and then we can drop the 3D cursor onto the Jeep seat. And note that we're doing this at the scene level instead of at the prop level. And this is because of the same renaming aspect we saw earlier. When we're instantiating linked objects into scenes, the original object name will get a .001, .02, .002, etc. appended onto it. And this can cause some problems with USDZ. USD and USDZ, which is just the compressed version of USD, do not allow periods in object names. So the USDZ exporter changes periods to underscores automatically, and then things get really messed up and stop matching. And automatic matching back to scene locators is what Jet Set and AutoShot are all about. So we want to make sure that the scene locator name is the same going to the USDZ model as is coming back. Next, we need to parent it to the moving vehicle. Now we're going to Shift A to add an empty there, and F2 to rename it, and we'll call it scene low driver seat. All right, so we've got a couple problems here. One is that it's a weird orientation because the Jeep is tilted and the scene locator is level. And the second is that it's not parented. So we're going to click on this scene low driver seat, going to hold down Control, and click on the Jeep root null here. That's the linked Jeep. And we're going to press Control P to parent, and we're going to pick Keep Transform without Inverse. So it's going to keep the transform. And now the scene locator moves along with the seat, but it's still oriented kind of strangely. You can see that the scene locator is level, but the Jeep is not level. So we want it to match the orientation of the seat. So we're going to pick the scene low driver's seat and go to the Object tab, and we're going to set its rotation X, Y, and Z to 0. There we go. Now it is oriented at the same way as the Jeep is. All right, so let's go to our viewport display and check our axes. And right now we have our y-axis pointing out the side and our x-axis pointing out the front. Let's reorient it to have x to the right of the vehicle. So once again, we have our scene locator picked. We're going to change our transform orientations to local, and we're going to type RZ90 to rotate around the z-axis 90 degrees. And so now our plus x-axis is pointing out the right side of the vehicle, and our y-axis is pointing out the back, and everything is going along, and the scene locators match the orientation of the Jeep. Great. Let's do a file, save as, and we're going to call this Jeep Drift Baked. And next we're going to export this out to JetSet.